Okay, so next bit of equipment is the sonde. This costs, what, 20,000?
No, I was about to say. It's about 9, I think.
$9,000. So,
Yeah, it was 11.
okay. So this is the sort of thing. These are very expensive bits of equipment, and therefore they have to be looked after. Now, what the sonde does, it logs temperature, depth, conductivity, pH, and dissolved oxygen. So it has several sensors at the bottom here. Okay, and when you're going to use it, you need to take off these covers. So there's two covers on here. Okay, this probe here, of course, is a pH sensor. If you want to take pH measurements, you need to calibrate it before you go out in the field. It's got a DO sensor here, so again, just with just a membrane, and you want to check it, make sure there's no debris. Has a small bubble in it, so that may need to be changed. There are kits for changing the membrane. Okay, so one of these kits should have some potassium chloride, I think it is, made up, and it should have a book of membranes that you use. The changing the membrane, the DO membrane on this is a bit of a pain, because what it requires to get it done right is the removal of this sensor here, so that you can get a good flat seal on top of it. So it requires at least 2 people, and if you want to do it, then you should probably get me and Warwick to help, because we've probably had the most experience in doing it. The conductivity sensor is inside here, so water comes in through here and take conductivity. And what this can do is you can either take a single measurement of these values, or you can set it to log independently over a period of time. But you need to have it on the correct setting for that to occur. And there's a comprehensive set of instructions in here. So this, again, is a book, has all the, who's calibrated it, and done maintenance on it, and there also who's been trained on it. It goes through, tells you how to calibrate each of like the pH, the DO. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about conductivity. That only needs to be done about every 6 months. If you're doing the dissolved oxygen, you'll need to know the barometric pressure in millimetres of mercury. Again, when we go into the lab, you'll see Nick's barometer in there, and there's a table that converts it into millimetres of mercury, which is what we enter into here. So when you're taking a measurement, you want to make sure you take off both these, because it'll need to know what the conductivity is, and the temperature is as well, so that you're getting accurate DO readings or conductivity readings or anything like that, because these things are all interconnected. So once you've taken it off, you carefully put the cap back on. Be careful not to touch the membrane on the DO meter. And on here, you have a menu. You want sonde run, and you just push the return button, connect to the sonde, and then it'll come up with a whole lot of readings, giving you pH, DO, conductivity and that, and you can take readings off that. Or if you want, you can log to a file in here, and then download it onto a computer, which we've got set up in the lab. We have the download cords for them somewhere.
Yes,
Yep, there. So we can just download from the hand unit, the MDS, onto the computer. Now the problem with this sonde is you can log to 2 different memory sources. You can log directly onto the sonde here, or which has quite a fairly large memory, or onto the MDS, which actually has a smaller memory. So that can cause problems, okay? So when you're logging, you want to make sure that you have enough memory for however long you're going to leave it out there. So if you're leaving it out there for several days, you want to log to this unit here. But if you're just doing short-term measurements, then you want to log to the MDS here. The reason we have the MDS is because this doesn't have an internal power source. Okay, it has no batteries in here, so it's always getting power from the MDS. Where you can run into trouble getting your data back off it, if you want to get the data onto the MDS to look at it, and you've been logging for several days, you're going to have a problem because there's not enough memory storage in the MDS as there is in the Sonde. So what you'd have to do is directly connect the Sonde up to the computer to download the file. So that's something you should be aware of.
Just on that note, once you've done your downloads of your files, please delete them off so that other people can use this to store more data to it.
Yep. Again, once you've done, you need to, you've taken your measurements, you need to put these back on. One with the little sponge in it needs to be kept onto the pH meter, and this one onto the depth sensor.
What do you use to clean the sensors before you put those caps back on?
They can be rinsed just in tap water.
Okay.
Just dry them off slightly with a tissue. So it should be damp but not wet. You want,
is just water okay for the pH sponge, or
yep.
do you soak it in a buffer of some sort?
No, water's just fine for the pH. As long as if you think it's dried out, you can just soak it in some pH 7 buffer for a couple of hours, and that will rehydrate the bulb. And that's the same for any of the pH meters. If you think the bulb looks dried out, just soak it in some pH 7 buffer for a few hours that you want, even overnight, and it should come back. Okay. Then just put the calibration bottle back over it and leave it like this. Again, please make sure that it's cleaned and dry when you put it back in here, so that nobody else is finding a nasty, yucky mess. We do have a number of these around. In fact, we've got a whole box. So this box here is full up with DO membrane kits, so you should always be able to find one. If not, Warwick will have one in his office.
That stays in the lab, it doesn't go out in the field.
Any questions?
How waterproof is the MDS unit?
It does.
Water resistant, I should say.
It does have an O-ring around here, but again, I wouldn't want be dropping it into the water.
It has been dropped into the water and it survived very well, but I don't do it on purpose.
Yeah, it's like any piece of equipment. Try not to get it wet.
So each time you want to take it out, there's a log, calibration log, so you know when it was last calibrated, so that if you're worried about the salinity as an important measurement and you see that it's probably been about a year since it was last calibrated, then it's a good idea to calibrate it. For DO and pH, you want to be calibrating it each time you go out, regardless.
Sort your equipment out well before you want to go out. But before you get it sorted.
For the non-waterproof measurement equipment you talked before, is it waterproof for rain?
Yeah, what you can do is actually, if you get a Ziploc bag and just put it over the top of the meter, and you can use it like that. That should be fine.
And when it comes back, if it's damp or wet inside there, give it a wipe down and leave the bag open so that it can air out.
One of the biggest problems I find is people just been in the field for a long day, they're tired when they get back, it's probably late at night, they've just got all these bits of equipment and they just go and shove it on the shelves again and think, well, I'll deal with it later, and then they don't. Okay, so if you're taking these bits of equipment out and using them, okay, so you come in late at night, just leave it on a trolley, okay, and then come in first thing in the morning, clean it up, dry it, and make sure it's back there for other people to use. Okay, we realise that okay, long day in the field, you don't really want to have to deal with it, but if you can deal with it the next day as soon as possible, don't just say, oh yeah, I've done my field work, I'm going to have a couple of days off now. It doesn't work like that, okay? Other people want to be using the equipment, so therefore it needs to be in an operational state for them to use it. Otherwise you're just throwing other people's field work off, okay? So just because your field work's finished doesn't mean that the work's finished. But we do recognise that the long day in the field, you really don't want to deal with these last things in the day. So please, if you could deal with them the next day, come in, make sure they're clean, they're dry, and they're ready for the next person, and you've got all your data off them. Okay? Any more questions?
Just a quick one, if you're using it like for a whole week and you calibrate it on Monday before you go out, is it kind of got a few days where you have to recalibrate it, or
I do the DO every day because it's relying on barometric pressure, which is going to change. And in fact, if you've got a large high or a low coming over, you may need to compensate for that between the start of the day and the end of the day, just to have consistency between the measurements. Your pH, I'd probably do every day just to be sure. It depends on how accurate you need your pH measurements. For this one, pH doesn't seem to drift too badly. If you're out in the field, camping out in the field, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you're coming back, yeah, I'd calibrate it every day. Yeah. Salinity's not a problem. Should be stable according to the manufacturer. And the other factor is that the conductivity solution we use to calibrate it is fairly expensive and it uses quite a large volume of it, so it's not something you want to be doing all the time unless you really have to.